So a little bit about who we are, so you understand where the data and the tool comes in. We were part of a larger parent organization that is what is sometimes called a Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, sometimes is the acronym. And all that means is that a CDFI is a community bank with a very specific mission, and that mission is to help revitalize low and moderate income communities through various and unique programs, including things like affordable housing, public housing, charter schools, grocery stores, and even community health centers. And working with them, we've always used data to understand where we invest money in and the impact of those investments. And that data we've always used in a very spatial way, or trying to visualize data. So that's kind of the genesis of PolicyMap. We wanted to build a tool that other and more just anybody else is able to access data that you probably heard about when it comes to things like the census or jobs data or housing foreclosure or crime data and so forth. All that information we wanted to make available for anyone to be able to go into a mapping tool and visualize what that data looks like on a map. And that's kind of what PolicyMap's goal is. We are a online data mapping tool. The goal is to have as much data as possible, but on an interface that users can build maps and utilize data visualization out of. So it does mean coming to PolicyMap, there is a lot of data, and there's a great place to start, and it's under this R data tab here. So you don't have to write this link down. I'll send you this link in the email, but I take everyone here from pretty much all of my trainings, mainly because there's a lot of data you can interact with within PolicyMap. And what this page is trying to do is help summarize all that data in just more manageable categories. And the way it works is if you scroll down a little bit, you'll get to this table of contents on the right-hand side. And these mimic the categories you're gonna see when we go into the tool itself. So let's say we wanna find out what's in economy. Whoops. It'll take you to economy. It'll tell you that within economy, you can find jobs data at the local level, at the maybe county metro level. There's small business information, there's unemployment information, there's bridges information, and even workforce characteristics. So what this is trying to do is, make sure the audio is okay. So what this is trying to do is give you a summary of the category without really digging that far into the category of data itself. So when you do get into PolicyMap, you'll realize that under workforce characteristics, it's not just workforce characteristics, it actually encompasses identifiers like the number of people in a given area that work, the percentage of people, the sex of those people, the race, ethnicity, earnings, and so forth. So it's trying to give you a broader summary of the category itself in that section. Two really important parts of this page that's helpful is the first, the years that are available, telling you exactly what years you can find within each one of these data sets. You'll see here 2000 is our baseline. We actually do not go past 2000 data-wise. A lot of different logistical reasons is the reason why, but many of our users use current and projected data. And then the other part that's very helpful is the geography that data is available at. So if I take us back up to jobs data at the local level, this chart here, going from left to right, is the largest, going from large to smallest, letting you know that in the case of jobs data at the local level, you can find it at this very small geography that's called a block group, and we'll explain more of that when we get into the tool. But as you see data at a much larger geography, you can see that it's available at tracts, counties, zip codes, cities, states, and so forth. And then, of course, the source of data for anyone that's here. So I'll show you how you can see data as well, the source of the data in the tool. But again, this is a really great place to start. As I scroll through this, you'll see there's just a lot of data, some really unique data like prime farmlands and flooded zones, but also other really unique data like grocery retail locations, housing index, commute to work, and such. It's a lot of data, and there's a lot of different ways to get to data, but this is a really great place to start when it comes to just getting an overview of what you can find within PolicyMap. If we go into the tool itself, well, this is where we'll spend most of our time today, which is inside the PolicyMap tool. There is a a couple different ways to interact with the data in PolicyMap, and they're actually all broken up by these features in the very top left here. You can see maps, tables, reports, three-layer maps, and the data loader. Let me just give you more real estate here. So we're going to spend all of our time in maps. And again, the goal of maps is to visualize data. So you can add data onto the map, you zoom to the neighborhood that you're working in, and now you can see where different pockets of places have a certain type of color that represents that data. We'll get into that a little further. But in the very top here, there are other ways to interact with it, and I'll just give a really quick walkthrough of some of these other features. But again, our goal is to give you the basics of maps. We do have other sessions to talk about some of these other features, but just to give you some ideas. So the tables page, the goal of tables is the ability to compare data across multiple or even different geographies, meaning that if you have 5 zip codes or 6 census tracts or block groups or even counties, you can add those places onto the bar chart below and then choose the data that you want to compare against. And that's really what tables does. You can see data compared against those places. And you can also see data compared against trend charts, so across multiple years in tables. The reports feature is probably a much more traditional way to look at data within PolicyMap. These are pre-built reports, so you don't have the ability to customize them, but each report is a grouping of very similar data sets built around a report theme. So in the case of a community profile, it really is just a demographic report, but within that you can find things like population, race, but then also things like income, workforce, housing, and even crime. So it's a report about the community that you're working in. As you can see, there's other reports that are helpful within that scope what the reports do. So health report, housing report, homestead report, and such. The 3-layer maps is the ability to compare data across multiple geographies. So unlike the maps page, very similar to the maps page where you're looking at data and you're visualizing across a given area, the 3-layer maps, as the name implies, is the ability to take 3 pieces of data and put it on top of each other and then cut up the data until you find places that would meet the intersection of 3 data layers. It's a really neat tool for site selection. So if you're trying to find places that meet very specific criteria, the 3-layer maps allows you to do just that. Oops. And then finally, the data loader allows you to upload a spreadsheet of addresses. Once you put those addresses into PolicyMap, you can visualize your addresses alongside all the other tools that are in PolicyMap. So you can see your data in maps, comparing your data alongside other data sets already here. You can query it in tables or even do radius reports within the reports page. Okay, so that's kind of the basics summary of the different features of PolicyMap. And again, the follow-up email will give you a tutorial of all the other features to break them down. That way, if you wanted to learn them on your own, you can, and we do cover them in other sessions. But the maps itself is pretty simple. The maps are interactive, meaning you can click and drag the map around within the window. You can zoom in and out using the zoom bar on the right. You can also use the scroll wheel on your mouse to scroll in and out as well. So pretty basic stuff when it comes to online maps. The location bar on the very top is the search tool, very similar to a Google Maps. You can type in an address. It will zoom to the address. It'll drop a little pin on there. And then from there, you can pan to a different part of the neighborhoods. You can also zoom in and out to get a broader picture of a given area. But you can also use the location bar as a bit of a geography search tool. So you can type in a zip code if you wanted to. It'll zoom into that zip code, it'll drop a pin or drop the boundary for it, and now you can see what this particular zip code looks like in a given area. And again, you have the same abilities to pan and move to other places across the area. One of the more unique features of the tool itself is that you can click onto the map at any time, and it will draw the smallest geography that's in our universe, but also show you all the other geographies that that point sits in. So in this case, this particular point sits within this block group and tract, but also sits within the zip code, school district, county, metro, state, and so forth. So if you're not familiar with some of these geographies in here, I'll just give you a really simple summary of the census boundaries, and that way you get an idea of how these boundaries kind of tie together a little bit. So the census that we do every 10 years and now every year with the American Community Survey, the census publishes that data not at the individual level, but they group people together into these really unique census geographies. And the smallest geography we use in PolicyMap is what is called a block group. That's the smallest boundary here. So a block group contains about 500 to 1,500 people, and it's really based on density of population. So you see here, this particular block group is very small and tiny, but if I were to go to cross the river into Camden on the waterfront, you'll see this block group covers the entire waterfront area. Again, based on density of population. So about 500 to 1,500 people. And the reason why the range is so large is because of urban versus rural areas. They have to kind of match those numbers across different places. And that's where the building blocks of geography starts. So a grouping of block groups build what is called a census tract. So a census tract, again, depending on where you're at, is very similar to a neighborhood or community or such. But then from there, tracts build things like ZICTAs. Tracts also build things like county subdivisions, which also grow into counties, and then they have the metros and the state and so forth. What we call these boundaries are predefined geographies, and all it means is that they exist in our universe within the PolicyMap tool. So you can search for them either by typing them into the search field up top, or for more complex boundaries, you can use the drop-down menu to search for those as well. So tracts and block groups we talked about, but also more complex geographies like congressional districts, state districts, and such. And the way these work is, in the case of state, choose the state that you're in. For state legislative districts, the upper is the House and the lower is the Assembly, or I'm sorry, the upper is the Senate and the lower is the House or Assembly. And then selecting them will actually draw their boundary and zoom into that area. So the search bar on the very top for location, the goal really is to add a boundary that you're working in onto the map, but also zoom that map to the place that you're working in as well. If you wanted to overlay some of those boundaries by themselves, you can use the option on the very bottom here, which is map boundaries. This allows you to select any of the boundaries, those predefined geographies I mentioned that are in our universe, and put them on the map to display. So these are actually congressional districts versus the legislative districts that we were talking about. You can, of course, combine multiple boundaries, giving you a chance to make these sometimes really crazy maps. You can also add and remove layers. There's two default layers that are on the tool, which is road and land use. So this allows you to have a much cleaner map sometimes. And then finally, within the map boundaries, there are some more unique boundaries, things like flood zones, farmlands that are improved. So that way, if you want to find out where the flood zones are in California, you have these really cool maps. It's a really large flood zone. Holy smokes. All right, and then finally, again, just understand the very top bar is to zoom the map to the place you're working in. The map boundaries is to overlay those boundaries that you're working in. But sometimes you need to make your own boundaries. Sometimes you are coming into a mapping tool, and you have very specific boundaries. And those boundaries can be a containment of roads or land use or even rivers and lakes and such. But those boundaries are always unique outside of the predefined geographies within PolicyMap. So we wanted to give users the ability to do just that. And it's on the bottom of the map here also where it says my custom regions. So the create button allows you to make those custom regions themselves. And there are 3 unique ways to make a custom region within the tool. So the draw feature is that. So if you take a moment and read the instructions, it'll tell you that when you click OK, your mouse turns into a pointer and you're simply just dropping the vertices of a target area. So while you're drawing, you can still zoom in to get closer to the street level if you wanted to. You can pan around to make sure you're capturing the places that you're working in. I always draw a very difficult boundary because why not? Oh my goodness, can I do this? And then you want to click onto a point or the first point, and it will close your target area that you drew. And you want to give it a custom name here. So a drawn custom region is unique in that it doesn't care about any of those underlying boundaries that we've talked about. It doesn't care that you cross city lines, county lines, block groups, tracks, and so forth. It will care about them when you want to download data or make a report for it. It'll figure out the right geographies that sit within your custom region, and it'll use a very simple 50% coverage rate to make sure that the aggregation is based on places that have at least 50% of its area within your custom region. With all that said, all that means is that the custom region is a bit of a freehand draw. It allows you to just basically draw that boundary as you want it, and the system will figure out the best ways to aggregate it. But sometimes you come into a tool like PolicyMap or a mapping tool in general, and you need to make boundaries that are based off of other geographies. Maybe you want to group together zip codes or counties to make kind of a metro or reach area that you're working in. So to do that, you use the assemble function in the tool. Again, the instructions will tell you when you click OK, it's going to default to the smallest geography that you're currently zoomed into, which for us is the census tract. But you can use this menu on the top right to choose, again, any of the boundaries that are in the PolicyMap tool. You can use block groups, zip codes, counties, and so forth. So if we wanted to say zip codes, the map redraws, and to make an assemble custom region, you're just clicking onto the map. If you make a mistake, you can just deselect geographies at any time. One of the other really unique features of the assemble custom region is that you can make a non-contiguous target area, allowing you to make boundaries that don't touch each other, basically. Give it a custom name. And so now you have a drawn custom region, an assemble custom region, and then of course you can do a radius one, which I won't cover, but you kind of get the gist of it. When you make a custom region, they'll appear in your My Custom Region menu, as well as the ability to make one in here. So from this menu here, you can either add or remove custom regions from the map. You can also have actions. You can rename it, you can delete it. The share feature is really unique, but I'll show you how you can share it as well. Along the edge of a custom region are two icons. The X will remove it from the map, whereas the red icon will give you a little bit of customization, including things like changing the boundary color, filling it in, controlling transparency, and so forth. Or you can also take your custom region into any of the other features in PolicyMap. You can take it to a tables page to compare your custom region alongside other geographies like counties and zip codes. You can get a report for that custom region, or one of the really unique features of the tool is that you can share this custom region with another subscriber. If you are a university user, you can actually share it either with the entire university or with other users within the universities. It's just a matter of adding their email address into the tool. And then finally, you can download data just for your custom region. So if you wanted to just get different data sets just for this very specific boundary, the download function does just that. Okay, so that is our whole session for boundaries. Hopefully that gives you some really good ideas about just boundaries in general. Again, the location bar is going to zoom the map or add a boundary that you're working in onto the map itself. The map boundaries allows you to overlay just the general boundaries of those places. And then of course the custom region allows you to make your very own boundaries that sit within PolicyMap. But once you have your area set up or situated to the area that you're working in, the next step really is the ability to add data onto the map. So before I dig too far into the data part, let me know if there's any questions that you've seen so far. Hopefully that covers some of the basics of the tool itself. And again, questions are available in the control panel. You can either raise your hand or just type your question into that control panel at any time. So one of the quick questions about the university users, can you share it with anyone? As long as they are on the university site license, it'll be shared within those user groups. You can share it with the main university itself, and everybody that comes to the main site license can access that. So there's two options. Yeah, the window in this will be just a little bit different because there will be an option that says all universities in here as well. Cool. All right, so once you have your map situated to the place you're working in, the next step really is the ability to add data. And that's really all of these categories above the map. So these categories mimic those categories we just talked about in the very first conversation, which is the data directory page. And as you can see here under economy, there's all these different categories. There's jobs at the local level, jobs at the county level. And you'll see why I take us there first is because jobs data isn't just jobs data. Jobs data in the case of the economy tab is by the very specific sectors that they represent. So in this case, this is mining for oil and gas or just mining in general, or retail, that's general merchandise or clothing or gasolines and so forth. So it's a very specific way that jobs are categorized within the tool. I'll do a really quick summary of some of the different categories you might be using or just in general what's in PolicyMap so you have an idea of how we put data in a category. But before we dig into that part itself, the data in PolicyMap that you can use is there are two types of data you can access within the tool, and they're really broken up by these columns within every one of these categories that you see here. So columns 1 and 2 are what we call a data layer. And all that means is the data is aggregated to these geographies, those block groups and tracks and zip codes and everything that we talked about. But there is no address level data for data layers. It's all aggregate data to a geography. So you see these colorful maps that you're probably familiar with when it comes to using PolicyMap. So that's columns 1 and 2. And as you can see, sometimes it cascades over to kind of a secondary column, just to give you an idea. Column 3, though, is what we call point data sets. And these are actual addresses for locations. And as you can click onto the map to get information for each point, or you can click onto the map to get each information for each place that you work in. But points and layers are the two types of data you can access. And points and layers, as you can see here, have their own legends, allowing you to do some really cool features with the data. So we'll get into that as we dig through this a little bit. But that's the big distinction. So columns 1 and 2 is layer data, meaning that it's no addresses associated to it, whereas column 3 is point data set, which is an address data set on the tool. So let me just give you a summary of some of the categories, again, just to give you a general sense of what and how we categorize data. So under demographics, these are some very basic variables related to demographics in here. So you can see it's everything from population information to racial characteristics to ethnicity, age group, and then you get into some really, really unique data sets. So veterans data, the census started categorizing that in much more detail. So how many veterans in poverty, by ethnicity, by even war, language spoken at home, immigration information. Still within demographics, you can see things like household information, household types and size, family types, election data. So election data is at the county level. It is not the precinct, but at the very least, you can see some really unique information at the county level. So you can work with election data at a state level if you wanted to. Income and spending starts out with some very basic variables related to income. So it's per capita and family. Household income is the most commonly used income measurement. And so because of that, the census breaks out into things like head of households, tenure, brackets, age buckets. There's poverty data. There's tax data from the IRS. Again, just a really, really neat data set from the IRS. This is all the 1040s that we complete every year. So these are individual taxes, not corporate or company taxes. But this is down to the zip code level, and is really an amazing way to look at income, population income in a given area at very specific information. Because it is from the IRS, it means that we have a ton of information associated to it. allowing you to break down things like unemployment information, capital gains, deductions created, credits like ETIC, um, child care credits, the minimum tax, the healthcare individual fees that people have to pay for not having insurance, and so forth. So a lot of really, really great information under income. If we jump into quality of life a little bit, it's a bit of a hodgepodge category. So it does cover things like crime data, a really neat data set for broadband internet access, how people get to work, and then some really neat data sets that we produce or create alongside other federal programs. So you might have heard of the USDA food desert, or now food access data. We also have a complementary data set called the limited supermarket access. So both research, the goal is to identify places that have limited or low access to groceries, and both do their own various studies in that process. Still within quality of life is the grocery locations that we use within our LSA studies. There's SNAP data, there's brownfield and Superfund sites, libraries, other nonprofits. We just go to economy for a second again. Again, industries by jobs, but then we get down to things like government spending for infrastructure, unemployment information, and then of course workforce characteristics, allowing you to see things like not only just where the workers are, but also what sectors they work in. Remember, we talked about the NAICS codes, but then the demographics of the workers themselves. So how many are making less than 15,000? How many have less than a high school degree? So this is much different from just the demographics of people. This is actually people that have a job or in the workforce based on the demographics of those people. And then finally, just I'll cover one last category, but again, there's a lot of really different categories to play with, and that's the health category. So with this, these are a lot of really unique variables related to health. When we first launched PolicyMap, our health category was very small because at that time, only the CDC and maybe HRSA had a handful of public data sets that are out there. But as time grew, people realized, or federal agencies realized, that health became a very, very important factor in understanding communities and community health. And so many studies were created, many surveys were created or added on to current surveys. So from that, it created this really dynamic data set. So everything from chronic conditions like diabetes and depressions and high cholesterol, to health status, to prenatal care, to health insurance information. So who has health insurance? And because this is from the census, it does break out health insurance by race, age, employment type. If you do have health insurance, it even asks what type of health insurance you have. So it's a lot of really neat ways to look at insurance data, as well as risk factor information, including opioid access, overweight and obesity and such. It's a lot of data, as you can tell. And what we tried our best to do is put them into a category that hopefully makes sense for what that data represents. But because sometimes data is very unique and that there's a lot of data to play with, we wanted to give users other ways to get to a data set. And that's the search bar on the very top left here. So the location bar is a search by geography, whereas the find search bar allows you to search for data, and it's actually searched by keywords. So if you want to find things like poverty data, it'll show you all the variables related to poverty. If you want to look for, opportunity zones or so, it'll find all the variables related to that particular program and so forth. So the goal of this is to kind of bypass the categories we have with data and hopefully dig within data that's based on keywords that you might be working with in that process. All right, so again, a good place, we encourage data exploration. We definitely know that a few of these categories probably make no sense to users unless you're in that industry that uses that data. But there are many categories that are more general and more easy to access. So hopefully you'll be able to dig through some of these to play with. But a good place to start is that our data page that I sent to you later on, and that will give you some easy summaries of of data you're gonna look at. But let's add a really simple one unless there's questions about data that we have. I'm happy to dig through it a little further. But I'm gonna add a really simple one, which is household income, just so you can see what it looks like. And we'll talk about how you can customize that data. So when you add a data layer, if you kind of walk around the map a little bit, you'll get all the tools to be able to read this map. So the first thing you'll see in the very top is a very simple sentence that is kind of a basic description of what this data is. So this is the estimated median household income. It is from what is called the ACS, or the American Community Survey, which is a 5-year rolling estimate. And that's why you see it say 2012 to 2016. If you ever want to get more information about a particular data layer, click onto the title, and this will bring down a longer description. And this is where we try to normalize some of the language that's available from the source to make it less wonky in its terminology, but more as a easy way to understand what the data represents. So in the case of this example, this is actually explaining what makes up a household and any kind of the suppression rules that were done for the ranges of high and low. The legend on the left will give you all the tools to be able to read the map right off the bat. There are probably two important things that you want to pay attention to in the legend first. The first is the shade by. This is telling you what geography the data itself is being shown at. And although you see 2010 next to the census tract, it's not the year of the data, it's actually the year of the boundary itself. So again, back to the biennial census that we do every 10 years, the census, after it's done, the census actually redraws a lot of the block groups and tracts all across the US, mainly because, again, based on density population, people shift, they move to different places, communities change. For whatever reason, those boundaries change a lot with it. And so every 10 years, the census updates those boundaries, and that's what you see here. And now with the American Community Survey, those boundaries are even updated every year. So we might even start seeing 2018, 2017 census tract boundaries here in the future. Other than that, beneath that is the value of the colors that are being shown. So we are in San Francisco, so some of these numbers are going to be obnoxious, but in here you'll see that there are, if you click onto the tracts, it'll give you the value of those tracts themselves. And it's saying that anything in a dark purple is a census tract that has a median income of over 78,000 or more, whereas the lighter color are tracts that have 35,000 or less. And as you can see, if you click onto it, it'll give you the value of that tract, but also the value of the places that it sits in. So this tract here has a median household income of 101,000, but it sits within a zip code of 53,000, in the county of only 87,000, and the state of 63,000. Can't really say 87 is only, but that's a big number still. So it's always interesting to get further down towards the valley itself. Oh, that's not bad. There we go. So the ability to click onto the map and like use the legend itself to read the map is a very simple process. One of the really unique features of the legend is that you can customize the map of the data layer using the legend itself. So the first thing you do is change the year itself, allowing you to go back in time and see what income was in 2000. So what you'll see here is the title changes to just now median household income of 2000. The legend changes from dark purple being 78,000 to dark purple being 57,000, and the lighter color is 28,000. And then when you click onto the map now, the numbers represents those numbers in 2000 versus now. So these are all pre.com bubble burst numbers. The variable is really unique in that it allows you to change the data itself. So the default variable for income is dollar amounts, because you want to see income as dollars. But if you click onto this, you'll see that there actually are a handful of percent change calculations that are variable options. So this actually allows you to see percent change of a 16-year change, which is 0 from 2000 to 2016, or just a 5-year change between 2011 and 2006. So when I select percent change, you'll see the title changes now to just from median household income to the percent change in household income between the 2 years available. The legend changes from dollar amounts to percentages, and now the percentages are saying that anything in the dark purple had an increase of 18.95% or more. So in this case, this is 25, 47, 22, and so forth. And anything in the dark orange is a decrease of 8.32% or more as well. So 12%, 17%, and so forth. So the variable is neat because you're actually just completely changing the data itself. We're still within the income data set, but now we're looking at income at percent changes instead of just income as dollar amounts themselves. And then finally, the ability to make your own cut points is probably really helpful in a place like Mountain View and such, and even San Francisco, because what this allows you to do is basically make your own cut points. Initially, these values here is just a simple quintile or 4 quintile range, and all that means is that our system, whatever data layer you add, our system takes the total number of geographies themselves, which are tracts in this example, and evenly divides those tracts into buckets of fifths. And it doesn't look at the value of the fifths itself, it just evenly divides them into those ranges. And that's really where these numbers come from. But if you wanted to control this a little bit, or in this case of San Francisco and the surrounding area, if you wanted to identify income ranges that are much higher than just 78,000, we give users the ability to do just that. You can click onto the edit range feature. This allows you to release the fields that are here. You can choose how many fields you want to show on the map. So maybe not 5, just 3 instead of 5. But in here, you can type in and key in different numbers here. So let's bring this number up a little bit because San Francisco is crazy. Let's go, we'll go 60,000 as the start and do 100. Whoops, I messed it up. I'm not used to working these large numbers here. Let's do 175, and then we'll do 225. Hey, wasn't as bad as I thought. So with a few edits, we can quickly identify places that have really, really high income, which is over 225,000. And then we can also identify places that have income below 60,000 with a few edits of the ranges. And that's really the benefit of that tool, is that now, whoops, sorry about that. Now, without having to click through everything, you can actually make your own cut points to identify exactly those places that meet those very specific ranges that you're looking for. And it's not just income. You can edit range for any piece of data in PolicyMap for any value. So it could be number, percent, dollar, rate, and so forth. Okay, so that's data layers. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to customize and add data layers. Again, the one big takeaway I always point out is when you add any data layer on the map, make sure you take a moment to look at the legend, make sure it has all the customization or the values that you want the map to be presented at, be it adding very specific ranges or geographies or even variables itself. And the one thing I accidentally skipped is if you wanted to ever see where the source of data comes from, click onto the legend, the source link in the legend here, and this will take you to our other page, which is what we call our data directory. You'll get this link, a general link itself, in my follow-up email. What this page is trying to do is summarize the data source that we have in PolicyMap. It gives us the ability to be as transparent as possible about the data you're going to use within the tool. So in this case, this data is from the biennial census, decennial census. The geography it represents, every data source will have a link to the raw data. So that way, if you do want to download your own data and do your own analysis on a much more larger scale, you can do that. There is download functions within PolicyMap, but this, of course, allows you to download the raw data itself. And then in the description, it'll be anything about the data we process. There will be methodology data, methodology steps that we'll use for any data sets that are here, and so forth. So that is a data layer. So let me know if there are any other questions about layer data. Hopefully it gives you some ideas of what you can use and how it works. In the meantime, let me add a really simple data set, which is schools for points, and we'll talk about points as we move forward. So points are really simple, as you can see. Points are just that. They're just icons on the map, and that icon represents an address of a school in that example. Whoops. Sometimes you click onto the school itself. So in this case, this is Burton Academic High. It's a regular school. It's a high school. It covers 9th through 12th grade. It has a total of 1,046 students. It has a student-teacher ratio of actually 16:1, or 17:1, which is really great for a 1,000-student-sized school. It's amazing. This is the enrollment of the information. So it's an even breakout within each class. This is the demographic of the school. So it's very diverse. This is an awesome school. And then what those numbers look like as percentages on the map and so forth. So each one of these schools has a wealth of information, just like that school that we saw there. Students, grades, enrollment, and so forth. And so what we wanted to do is take all this information and turn it into a filter that allows the user to basically show just the schools they want to show. In this case, just the schools that they want to show on the map. So because when you add a point data set, you are showing 100% of the points on the map based on the extent that you're looking at. And the filters allows you to whittle down those points into just the ones in the groupings that you want to work with. So in this example here then, with schools, we can filter by things like the type of schools, the status that it is, the level that it covers, total number of students, is it eligible for certain programs, is it a charter school, magnet school? As we get even further, the demographics of the schools we can filter by, and so forth. So there's a lot of really unique ways to filter schools or points in general, but in the case of schools, let's do something really simple. Let's say we want to show just middle schools in the map. As you can see, the map redraws, and now only middle schools are being shown on the map at once. The neat thing about filters is that you can add additional filters. You can cross-tab different filters from different categories. So let's say we want to show middle schools and high schools at the same time. So now we have both of those schools on the map at the same time. And I can say, of these middle schools and high schools, we want to find out which ones that have fewer than 250 students, because we're going to use a different category alongside. And so now it filters out all the schools that are middle school and high school, but just the ones that have 250 students or fewer in those schools. And then finally, one of the last parts of filters is that you can take one category of filter and color code them based on the different ranges that are available. So in this example, then anything in anything in a blue are schools that have 18 or more student-teacher ratios. But then anything in the orange is 13 or less, and everything in between, that you can see. So most of San Francisco and the Bay Area seems to have a high student-teacher ratio numbers. And then finally, of course, you can add points and layers onto the map, allowing you to make sometimes some really cool maps that you see here. Okay, so that's the bulk of our sessions today. I'm going to show you how to export and save maps and share with other users. But before I get into that part itself, let me know if there are any questions about what you've seen so far, data-wise, anything you want me to cover that you might have wanted to learn or just see within the tool. Other than that, again, the one big thing I try to point out when it comes to loading data, any type of data on PolicyMap, be it points or layers, is the legend. Make sure you take a moment to use the legend so that it's customized to how you want to present that data, be it the range is custom to the place that you're working in, or the filters have the right points that you're showing on the map at the same time. Sure, one of the questions is about adding your own data onto the map. So that's using the data loader, which we won't cover today, but if you do upload a data set using the data loader, it will be in this very first tab under My Data, and this allows you to overlay any data sets that you've created and uploaded onto the tool itself. All right. So let's say we have this map built. Let me put San Francisco back on here. All right, so let's say we have this really great map built. And you know what? I'll put Oakland on here because it'll look a little nicer. And now we want to share this map with somebody else because, well, we don't want to leave it in PolicyMap. We want to actually be able to use it somewhere else. And so there's a couple of different ways to be able to do that. And they're all available in these icons in the top right-hand corner. So the icon that I always tell users to take advantage of is the save icon. This allows you to save this particular map and this instance of this map into your own personal account. Again, if you're a university user, make sure you make an account first, so that way you are saving just within your own workspace. Otherwise, the default save is to save it within the entire university program, which is purged every half year or so. So if you want to keep everything permanently, make sure you make a user account, and that way it's saved within your own workspace. But if you do save work, one of the neat things about the saving feature is that it allows you to save it into your account indefinitely, meaning that I can come back a month from now, a year from now, or 5 years from now, and this particular map that I created will still be here. The data will be updated, but you'll have the ability to recreate the map that you made with all the ranges, all the customization that was done previously will be saved in this instance that you save it. If you wanted to take this map offline and email it to another user, print it out, and put it into an insert or so, you're going to use the print icon in the top right from here. So this opens up a very simple dialog box, and then within the dialog box, you can pan around, giving you a chance to center the map where you're working in. You can zoom in to get closer to a given area. And then on the left-hand side is additional customization, including things like making the font larger and smaller, changing the orientation of the map. So in this case, Oakland's a little bit vertical, so we can actually change it to portrait, allowing us to capture more of Oakland into our printout. The PNG and the PDF is just how you want to use this map outside of the PolicyMap tool. So a PDF is a good electronic file that allows you to maybe attach it as an email or print it out and put it as an insert into your work. Whereas the PNG, think of it as a digital photo, so it has much more dynamic options, things like copy and pasting into a Word document or a PowerPoint, cropping things out. You can make it larger and smaller by scaling it, and so forth. You can add additional text onto the title. So that way, if you wanted to add the project or the program that you're working in, this allows you to do just that. You can also remove all this information, allowing you to have a clean, simple map. So that way you don't need all the distractions of what you have the data-wise. And users use this to make their own description outside of the tool or the map itself. And then my personal favorite is the ability to add more features, things like adding the description of the data. So again, you don't have to be to memorize the actual data itself. You can use all the tools to add that context of your map here. Then my personal favorite is the ability to cut out selected locations, sometimes called island printing. And all that means is that you can see here what it does only shades in the area of the place that I'm working in. So this is Oakland shaded in. And you can see the difference between the two maps and how really dramatic it makes the printout look for that place you're working in. And then finally, when you export, it saves a copy onto your desktop. Again, it does not save it into your account. So if you do want to save it to this your account later on, make sure you use that save feature itself. So when you download something or print something in PolicyMap, it is a static map that you're downloading, meaning that whoever you share it with, they're going to get just to be able to see it as a picture basically of that map. If you wanted to share that data in a much more dynamic way, you're going to use the share feature in the top right-hand corner here. So there's a couple of different ways to share a map in PolicyMap. You can create this link, and this link you can basically copy and paste it, and again, embed it into an email or a Word document, so that way whoever clicks onto it will open up the map exactly to the place that you're working in with the data you have on the top, as well as any customization you've done for that data there. You can email that link to another person, saving you that whole time to embed. You can post it on social media. So as a bunch of data nerds here, we love the social media feature. It allows us to share data that we work with, or just general data that's more relevant to whatever topic and discussion we have at that time. And then the final feature, which is really cool for a lot of users, is the ability to put an interactive map onto your website or just to a website, allowing your user to basically have a window into the tool, and they can click and drag the map around within that tool. So sorry for the pop-up here. This is my printout. So you can see here's the title, has the description, the different legends, and you can see how Oakland is cut out from all the other features of the area. So I can copy and paste this map. I can put it into another Word document or a PowerPoint, but I own this map forever, allowing me to do any kind of edits and updates to it that I want. Okay, so that is actually our entire session, including how to export and some unique features. Again, if you have any questions as you go through the tool, learning about the tool itself, or just run into any roadblocks, email me, contact me anytime. We're happy to answer any general questions. There are a lot of cool things we covered in today's session. There's still a lot of really other cool things that are out there in PolicyMap. We just don't try to cram it into one session. So hopefully this gives you some ideas. All right, thank you so much for your time, and good luck. Have a great day.